Welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, and thank you for joining me this evening. Tonight, we are bringing you a TJPS special report on the Texas floods. My guest tonight is Dr. John Cortinas, the former Deputy Assistant Administrator for Science at NOAA's Research Office in Miami. He was previously on this show last month speaking about cuts to NOAA and how they would affect us going into hurricane season and other natural disasters. He retired earlier this year amid all that was happening in terms of the budget cuts and the staff being fired at those essential agencies. It is a must-see interview, so definitely stay tuned for that. But in order to understand where we are right now in regard to the Texas floods, we must go back to May. You might remember the tri-state tornadoes. Residents in Missouri, Kentucky, and Virginia were all impacted. Ultimately, 28 people were killed and dozens more were wounded. The mayor of St. Louis called it one of the worst in the city's history. Quote, "The devastation is truly heartbreaking." In Kentucky alone, you had such a high death toll at the time that the governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, he warned residents in visceral detail that there could be, quote, "a whole block out there where everybody is dead." I hope that's not the case, but you see 5 houses in a row, they're just gone entirely. The scene in Kentucky was described as a war zone. It was so horrific on the ground that essentially the damage left by that tornado that caused all of this destruction, it could be seen from space. This was released from NASA. You might remember that while the death toll was still being counted and officials were still surveying the damage and looking for missing people, this story broke at USA Today. Kentucky National Weather Service Forecast Office faced federal staffing cuts before deadly tornadoes hit. According to this reporting here, the Jackson, Kentucky office recently cut overnight staff, but meteorologists were called in to handle the deadly tornado. So there was a full staff the night that this happened, but still that forecast office has had to endure federal staffing cuts. And just think about that for a second. Why would you want to cut off essential, agencies, their local offices in different parts of the country? Why would you want to have staffing cuts and a shortage of staff at a National Weather Service office where they're in charge of forecasting, weather alerts to local civilians who can get out in time? Those weather alerts save lives, because if we go back to the history of this country in terms of, back in just the oldest weather agencies in our country, the technology has improved. It has. But doing stuff like this is detrimental. It's going to be completely pernicious and not only, harm lives, but also kill people. This is from a special report I did on last month about additional funding cuts to essential science and weather agencies. And by February of this year, in Elon Musk's Doge slashing mission, they got around to NOAA, and around 1,000 employees were terminated. In addition to funding cuts, the terminations included 2 flight directors at NOAA's Hurricane Hunter unit, reducing the staff there to 60%. Do you know what that section does? They collect real-time data within hurricanes to improve hurricane forecast and warnings. They fly alongside hurricanes in the sky just so we can get a more accurate prediction on what the hurricane can possibly do and when it makes impact. Really think it's a good idea to let those people go? In Florida, cuts were made to the National Weather Service and workforce shortages of 40% at its Miami and Key West offices, leaving them short-staffed along with 12 other offices along the Gulf Coast. NOAA is about so much more than just hurricanes, yet their budget is being reduced. According to a draft budget proposal viewed by NPR, quote, "The agency's budget for 2026 would be slashed by more than 25% overall from its current level of roughly $6 billion under the proposal, which would need to be approved by Congress. The draft cuts to NOAA's research operations and fisheries services are particularly severe. If enacted, the cuts would take us back to the 1950s in terms of our scientific footing in the American people, says Craig McLean, a former director of NOAA's Office in Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, the agency's research arm, whose career spanned multiple administrations. The budget aims to eliminate OAR, cutting the budget by close to 75% from previous levels and slashing all funding for research that focuses on climate and weather. A few groups from the office, like a team that works on tornado science, would be moved to other parts of the organization. The budget would also end funding for the many cooperative research centers scattered across the country that contribute to climate and weather research. The proposed budget comes as the administration has already fired hundreds of NOAA employees. It also proposes slashing the operations and personnel budget of the National Marine Fisheries Service, which manages the country's ocean fisheries, by nearly 30%, and moving the rest of the office into the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, another agency entirely. It also asks for the Fisheries Service staff still within the agency to prioritize ways within its purview to unleash American energy. End quote. NPR asked the White House Office of Budget and Management for a comment. They said no final funding decisions have been made. The Department of Commerce was also asked for a comment. They did not respond. In some ways, we kind of saw this coming, I will say. Because, Project 2025, for instance, calls for NOAA to be broken up and to be downsized. Because, sure, it's going to be a great idea in our campaign to go after the administrative state and to own the libs, to dismantle the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And also, let's gut the National Weather Service while we're at it too. Let's make sure the National Weather Service is short-staffed ahead of hurricane season, amid tornadoes, causing great damage and impact in this country. And just amid all types of natural weather disasters, let's make sure that we dismantle the National Weather Service and also start doing mass firings and budget cuts at NOAA. What is the reason for that? But also think about the broader implications here and how horrific this is. NOAA just told us that the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has reached the highest level in millions of years. But instead of doing stuff to fix that, the Trump administration is doing stuff like ordering climate.gov to be shut down. In the state of Texas, there are staff vacancies at weather offices ahead of hurricane season. In Alaska, because of firings at NOAA and massive cuts, it will cause the management of the fisheries there, in some cases, the work to be canceled, according to an official. NOAA's Center for Heat Resilient Communities, which could have helped local officials keep residents safe, has evaporated. So again, all of those cuts transpired. All of those cuts and all of those firings happened. Why are we firing the freaking team that is in charge of getting in airplanes and flying next to hurricanes to make sure that we have an accurate prediction on what that storm is going to look like, the damage it could possibly, do once it hits mainland? Why are we doing stuff like this? I mean, it got so bad in regard to all of these cuts that were transpiring that the National Weather Service, the former living directors of the National Weather Service, wrote a letter about this. You can see here it says, an open letter to the American public from all former National Weather Service directors. Quote, the proposed budget for fiscal year 2026 just released by the White House cuts the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration by close to 30%. While details aren't yet available, if earlier indications hold true, this budget would essentially eliminate NOAA's research functions for weather, slash funding for next generation satellite procurement, and severely limit ocean data observations. Even if the National Weather Service remains level funded, given the interconnectedness of all the parts of NOAA, there will be impacts to weather forecasting as well. We cannot let this happen. NOAA's satellites provide vital information about the formation and pathways of storms. NOAA research on severe storms have paved the way for tools we now use every day, such as Doppler radar and storm modeling advancements. NOAA Corps pilots fly into hurricanes to bring us real-time information on these increasingly severe storms, and data from ocean bayous add breadth and depth to our understanding of the interaction between the atmosphere and the sea. These proposed cuts come just days after approximately 300 National Weather Service employees left the public service to which they have devoted their lives and careers. That's on top of the approximately 250 National Weather Service employees who were fired as a result of their probationary status in new, often higher-level positions, or took the initial buyout offered by the Trump administration in early February. Positions that leaves the nation's official weather forecasting entity at a significant deficit, down more than 10% of its staffing, just as we head into the busiest time for severe storm predictions like tornadoes and hurricanes. National Weather Service staff will have an impossible task to continue its current level of services. Some forecast offices will be so short-staffed that they may be forced to go to part-time services. Not only are there fewer forecasters, there are fewer electronic technicians who are responsible for maintaining the critical NEXRAD radars. Our worst nightmare is that the weather forecast offices will be so understaffed that there will be needless loss of life. We know that's a nightmare shared by those on the forecasting front lines and by the people who depend on their efforts. End quote. So once again, that is a letter here from the former 5 living directors of the National Weather Service. They all served. And they released that letter. Because when it comes to cuts to the National Weather Service, when it comes to cuts to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, you have to understand how pernicious that is. You have to understand how diametrically maniacal and anti-science that is, how anti-human that is. I mean, these are real people's lives that are going to be impacted as a result of forecast, varying because of weather cuts, of potential weather stations in this country, weather offices effectively going part-time because there's not enough staff. Humans can only work so much. But real human lives are on the line here. And it's only getting worse. We got reporting last month from the Washington Post that the Pentagon will no longer share satellite data that tracks hurricanes overnight. Quote, hurricane forecasters will soon lose access to government satellite data vital to tracking hurricanes overnight and preventing what meteorologists call a sunrise surprise, when a storm unexpectedly strengthens or shifts in the darkness. The Pentagon said Monday that it would wait until the end of July before it stopped sharing data. In the notice, defense officials cited concerns from Karen Germain, director of the Earth Science Division at NASA. Scientists were initially given less than a week to prepare for the loss of the microwave data, but some meteorologists worry that July is still too soon, and experts have raised concerns that the loss of data could set forecasting capabilities back decades. End quote. So again, I mean, we talked about like the National Weather Bureau back in like the 80s and early 1800s, and the history of other weather agencies in this country. But when you talk about what's happening here, I mean, it's an attack on science. Yes, Project 2025 did promise, to not have any talk about climate change in the government. It also promised not to have any talk about, actually doing anything that's pro-science. I mean, the Trump administration just effectively shut down the National Climate Report website. They have shut that down completely. Climate.gov is gone. It's gone dark. Think about what that means here. The attack on science is going to cost lives, just like it did during COVID, just like it is doing right now. And so as we get these horrific scenes out of Texas, watching the pernicious scenes here out of Central Texas, where a lethal flash flood has left more than 100 dead, we have to contend with that context, that all of this is happening, and all of this will only get worse because of the Trump administration's anti-science attacks. This was the front page of the Houston Chronicle today. Quote, tolls unrelenting rise. Searchers comb every foot, every mile, every bend of the river for unknown number of missing. End quote. 2 sisters were found dead holding hands. They were locked holding hands. Even in their last moments, they were holding on and caring for each other. We learned of this after reports confirmed yesterday that 27 girls and counselors from Camp Mystic all died in the floods. This was the front page of the Kerrville Daily Times. You can see a little girl in the picture there. Her name is Mary Grace Baker, and her body has just been found. A Houston elementary school student was among the deceased at Camp Mystic, as well as a police officer who has been assisting in the search and rescue efforts. This is where we are as a country. This is what's happening. I mean, just look at those images again. Massive flooding out of central Texas. Massive flooding. When it comes to natural disasters like this, we have to be honest with the fact. We need to start being more honest with the fact with ourselves in society that, yes, we do need to be speaking about things like climate change and what's happening on the ground in terms of our National Weather Service offices and NOAA being essential, pivotal agencies here. Because climate change is only getting worse. It is an existential threat. And so, understanding this story, again, is also understanding the context. Back in May, Paul Ura, this man here on your screen, he is the warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service's Central Texas offices. And back in May, he took an early retirement because of the massive cuts to his agency and offices across the country. He took an early retirement because of these budget cuts. Amid these devastating floods in central Texas, Texas Republican officials are now blaming the National Weather Service for a faulty forecast. I wonder why that happened.
You talked in what you just said kind of about expertise and about just knowing the area, and that extends also to the National Weather Service folks who are in those offices and have years and years of experience. There are currently 6 vacancies in the local National Weather Service office that cover Kerr County. What is your perspective on how that could have impacted the warnings that you all were able to get and how accurate the information you all were able to get?
So I know nothing about the staffing. What I do know is what they put out.
The original forecast that we received on Wednesday from the National Weather Service predicted 3 to 6 inches of rain in the Concho Valley and 4 to 8 inches of rain in the Hill Country. We worked with our own meteorologists to fine-tune that weather statement, and as many of you know, and many of you in broadcast journalism and meteorology, you can go back and look at your own forecast, and the amount of rain that fell in this specific location was never in any of those forecasts.
This rain event sat on top of that and dumped more rain than what was forecasted on both of those forks. When we got the report, it was about 7 feet or so on the South Fork, and within a matter of minutes it was up to 29 feet, and all of that converged at the Guadalupe, and that's where we saw those very quick rise in flood.
But listen, everybody got the forecast from the National Weather Service, right? You all got it. You're all in media. You got that forecast. It did not predict the amount of rain that we saw.
Again, that's Texas Republicans with this fake outrage here. Like they did not enable a president whose attacks on science have cost human lives. You do not get to have fake outrage here. It is completely unacceptable. It is completely despicable to pretend like you were not a part of this crisis that ensued, effectively. You said nothing. You said nothing when he took his early retirement because of how bad these budget cuts were. This is from the New York Times. Quote, as flood hit, key roles were vacant at Weather Service offices in Texas. Some experts say staff shortages might have complicated ability to coordinate responses with local emergency management officials. Again, you do not get to have fake outrage because we're now getting headlines like this, and we're also understanding the devastating impacts of National Weather Service cuts and NOAA cuts as well. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is now calling for an investigation into the National Weather Service's response in Texas and those vacancies, essentially how that could have affected, essentially people getting warned in time. The devastating part about this story is that we are going to see this get worse across the country. It already started, and it's only going to get worse from here. And I mean, we have to contend with that now. We have to contend with that. I mean, for all the drama about Elon Musk and Donald Trump right now, as entertaining as it may be to some people, do not lose sight of the fact that together, Elon Musk and Donald Trump actively took a sledgehammer to the federal government of the United States. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers were fired. USAID today now effectively is gone and does not work when you go to their website because it continuously still looks like this. They took a sledgehammer to science, the National Weather Service, NOAA. And so now, as a result, each life that is lost, each tragedy that transpires, for each faulty forecast that we get, that will have to be on their conscience, knowing that their actions contributed to such manufactured chaos, to such inexplicable crisis, to such disastrous pain. As we watch the uncontrollable flooding out of Texas, we are seeing, Mexican firefighters come to help out, as well as others from across the United States and other places, because, the federal government is just going to be a little bit slower now because actually, hey, FEMA that's supposed to help you, we actually want to end that soon. We also have incompetent leaders, who's the head of FEMA who effectively doesn't even know that hurricane season is a thing. This is what they want. For people to suffer, for people to hurt, for people to be more misinformed and more blind to the tragedies that are going to hit their states. Hurricane season has now effectively started, and we are in a vituperatively worse position than we were last year, when no such budget cuts or staff firings existed. My guest tonight is Dr. John Cortinas, the former Deputy Assistant Administrator for Science at NOAA's Research Office in Miami. He joins me next. Stay with us. The Jeremiah Patterson Show is an independent news media platform. If you want to see more special reports like this, please consider becoming a paid subscriber to my Substack at tjpsnews. When you become a paid subscriber, you'll get immediate access to exclusive content, opinion pieces, the upcoming Resistance podcast, and The More You Know, a series focused on diving deeper behind the headlines with historical context. According to one viewer who upgraded to a paid subscription, quote, "I like your deep dive style. There are many doing the quick news updates, which is helpful, but we need both." Another viewer said, "Jeremiah, you are a fantastic reporter and I truly value your work." I do this because it matters, because the investigative journalism is imperative, and most of all, I'm unabashed and unafraid to tell the truth. Upgrade now from free to paid for just $7.99 a month or $75 a year. Welcome back. Joining me now for the interview is Dr. John Cortinas, the former Deputy Assistant Administrator for Science at NOAA's Research Office in Miami. Dr. Cortinas, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
My pleasure.
I want to speak about what's been happening so far in Texas in regards to these massive floods. When I opened up the show, I talked about how after the Kentucky tornado happened back in May, we saw reports essentially of the National Weather Service Forecast Office there having faced federal staffing cuts. I want to ask you here, how critical is it, when it comes to real-time monitoring in the essentially the issuance of flood watches, for there to be full staff at these offices and, for staff not to be cut?
Well, certainly it's important to have a fully staffed office because, the staffing is determined based on the responsibilities, the roles of the various positions. And so anytime one person is missing, something may not be getting done. That's not to say that roles and responsibilities can be shared and that someone might be able to perform two, duties at the same time, depending on what it is. In this particular case, the warning coordination meteorologist was the position that was currently vacant.
Hmm.
And that position is indeed extremely critical to reaching out to the community, to ensuring that there's good communication between the office and various users of that information. But that doesn't mean that there's a warning coordination meteorologist on staff 24 hours a day, and that's totally needed in order to perform such a function. The forecasters, in their responsibilities, do communicate information in that way. And so it's difficult until there's kind of a full analysis of really what was happening and what roles and responsibilities may not have been performed in order to really say whether the lack of that position had any impact. Certainly, the Weather Service forecasters performed and issued warnings and watches well ahead of the event. And so there was a notification that a very serious situation could evolve, and the warnings were issued hours before the devastating effects took place. So the Weather Service, in terms of their role of warning the public, of issuing products, they certainly met that, and they provided that necessary information and warning. The difficulty was the time in the middle of the night, and while everyone may not be paying attention as they should have, that contributed, no doubt, to the devastation.
Mm. When it comes to short staff, just something that's going to be happening more, how much added stress or burnout would that create, essentially, with certain offices maybe having to go to part-time or not being able to do as much as they used to with when they were at full capacity?
Well, I think what the Weather Service is attempting to do is to make sure that they can move staff around as needed for some of these offices that might be shorthanded, particularly when we have these really serious events and where there's active weather. When the weather is not active and it's simply a sunny day with having to issue a forecast, there should be no problems in terms of maintaining the various roles and responsibilities, even if you're shorthanded a bit. But the real issues come about when there's serious, severe weather, something really happening in which there's ongoing activity among the entire office. And so the intent, I believe, of the Weather Service is to make sure that they can call in people from other offices. They do have the ability to work remotely, and so they can still perform many of the duties that they would be able to, even if as if they were in the office. And so that certainly is what the Weather Service has been doing, and they intend to fully be able to provide the warnings and watches and forecasts that are necessary for the public. But in the heat of things, when things become real active, there may be things that you don't always anticipate. And so not necessarily having a full complement could be difficult in some instances where, let's say, you have multiple events going on. So we were talking about one event here, but in certain offices at certain times of the year, you might have a number of things actually going on at the same time in different parts of your forecast area, if you will. And so those times will be extremely challenging, particularly when they weren't anticipated. If something were to all of a sudden pop up, if you will, a severe storm that wasn't necessarily anticipated, pulling in the right people and trying to ensure that you have not overburdened the forecasters that are attempting to do their job to make sure they're issuing all the warnings and watches that are necessary could be really difficult in the future if they're not able to deal with this shortfalls within the various offices.
Mm. I wanted to ask you here in regard to recent reports about like the Pentagon stopping coordination with, NWS and, just these institutional for like hurricane surveillance, these institutional scientific agencies. How does losing institutional knowledge and coordination with other departments in the government, such as senior forecasters or experienced, modelers, how does that affect both like short-term forecasting and then long-term like climate resilience ahead of hurricane season?
Well, there's always been a good level of communication and interaction among the federal agencies, particularly between NOAA and a number of other federal agencies, just because of the dependencies on weather, climate, those kinds of things. So over the last, 5 years or so, NOAA's really made a great effort to reach out to various stakeholders, both within the federal government and outside the federal government, including various states, local entities, et cetera. And so that interaction depends on people. And so if you have fewer people, there's going to be fewer interactions. And there are also people like the warning coordination meteorologists that specialize in how to coordinate with various groups. And so that's an expertise that if you lose those people who have developed that expertise, you would expect that that task, that role, that responsibility is not going to be done as effectively as with someone who has a lot more experience. And so we're certainly seeing that with the number of people that have chosen to retire, et cetera, that have had many years in many parts of NOAA in terms of their ability to communicate and do that. But what I'm also most concerned about is the proposed elimination of the research laboratories within NOAA that actually develop the tools and the computer models and the observations and new technologies that the Weather Service uses. So it's not necessarily the Weather Service that creates a new computer model to forecast or improve the forecast of hurricanes. It's actually the NOAA the research part of NOAA that is working on improvements to models, on new technologies to collect observations like drones. That's not being done in the Weather Service. That's being done in the research part of NOAA, which has been proposed to be eliminated very soon.
Can you sort of clarify and I guess explain for individuals who may not have known per the history and research the essential agency that is NOAA and how it coordinates a lot with NWS?
Sure. So NOAA is made up of what we call line offices. They're essentially major parts of NOAA that conduct a particular mission. And everyone is familiar with the National Weather Service, but that's just one of our line offices. Another of our line offices is the National Marine Fisheries Service. They focus on fisheries, fisheries management, marine ecosystems, those kinds of activities. Then we have the National Ocean Service, and that, as the name implies, focus on ocean, our coastal communities, and understanding the processes that occur at the coast and can impact people, whether it's sea level rise, whether it's a number of other of activities or phenomena that occur at the coast. And then we have NOAA Research. That's another separate line office. And then we have the Satellite Service. And then we have the service that manages our ships and aircraft. And so each one of these are individual units of NOAA. And the Weather Service, in order to do its job, really relies on most of the other units within NOAA. So the Satellite Service, for example, oversees the satellites and the data that comes from the satellites. National Ocean Service, responsible for the observations that occur in the coastal zone, collecting ocean conditions and how that may affect weather. Certainly, NOAA Research is responsible for creating new and improving the weather models, climate models, collection of observations, new ways of using artificial intelligence, et cetera, that the Weather Service can use. And so those are examples of how many parts of NOAA all contribute to the National Weather Service and their ability to be able to provide the best forecast possible.
What are the long-term impacts going like years ahead here of not just budget cuts, but also, staff cuts and, people taking early retirement at agencies like NOAA when it comes to hurricanes. Because I know NOAA does a lot of work essentially when it comes to also the team that flies alongside hurricanes and also those research laboratories. What is the long-term impact of that?
Well, the long-term impact, I think, is certainly significant because it's those laboratories that are preparing NOAA for the future. And without those laboratories, without the necessary research that's constantly being done, it's going to be very difficult to improve what we're doing today. So one of our laboratories, for example, has been the laboratory that has developed the state-of-the-art hurricane forecast model that's been used by the Weather Service, as well as many other countries and private companies. That model is being improved so that it will give us more accurate forecast of where, let's say, the hurricane may make landfall, how strong the hurricane may be, how much precipitation the hurricane's going to produce. We know that with time, we're able to improve these kinds of predictions. And so there's still a long way to go because, as we know, not every forecast is perfect. There's still a lot of room for improvement, but we really need a dedicated group of scientists who have that expertise and have the ongoing resources, commitments like funding and interactions and partnerships with the private sector, for instance, to develop and increasingly improve those forecast models. That's just one example.
Lastly, I wanted to ask you here, what keeps you up at night when we talk about all of this?
What keeps me up at night is my worry over our ability to make these improvements, as I said. I know because I spent my entire career within the NOAA research part of NOAA that amazing discoveries have occurred and that have benefited the public in terms of our ability to warn people, save lives, etc. If we're to cut that off, as is proposed, closing all 10 of our laboratories around the country very quickly, I'm very worried about our ability to continue to improve our products and services and our ability to warn and save lives.
Once again, my guest is Dr. John Cortinas, the former Deputy Assistant Administrator for Science at NOAA's Research Office in Miami. Thank you again for coming on the show, and thank you for your service.
My pleasure.
Producing the Jeremiah Patterson Show is quite literally insane. It is the most laborious job, but it is also extremely rewarding, and also a job that really fills you with so much knowledge, but also, since you're very close to the news, a lot of despondency and emotional turmoil. When people watch my show, I want them to leave feeling completely informed and also astonished at the information that was presented. And in this second Trump administration, there really is so much contending with. So essentially, it's me gathering an avalanche of information and putting it on display for my audience, every other night and in special reports. And trying to make sense of it the best way I can with historical context or just comprehensive reporting. Trying to actually get the show done by 8 p.m. Eastern is actually, I feel, one of my greatest adversities. But showtime is huge because I have to essentially duck under the lights in my bedroom and then head straight to my desk with the printed out material for the show, whether that's going to be the script or essentially I'm quoting something from a news article, so I have it directly on the desk. I have to make sure that the mic is prepared and it's ready and that the lighting is good and essentially that everything is up to par so I can record great content. Welcome back. We're following some breaking news here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show. The United States Supreme Court has just cleared the way for Donald Trump's plans to continue to fire federal workers and completely eviscerate the administrative state the way that it is in the federal government. So we're talking about essential agencies like the EPA, like the National Weather Service, as I was just talking to Dr. Cortinas about, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, all these essential organizations like DOE, the Department of Education, the Department of Defense. We're seeing massive layoffs continue. And with the United States Supreme Court has just done, effectively, the justices overrode lower courts' orders that temporarily froze the cuts, which have been led by the Department of Government Efficiency. The court said in an unsigned order that no specific cuts were in front of the justices, only an executive order issued by Trump and an administration directive for agencies to undertake job reductions. So again, we're continuing to see this happen right now. The Supreme Court enabling Donald Trump and what he's doing, not necessarily surprising given their immunity ruling that we saw in the summer of 2024, effectively enabling whatever he wanted to do as a wannabe dictator, and we're seeing that continue to play out. Yesterday in the streets of Los Angeles, really at a park in Los Angeles, of course we know that federal troops are still there, active duty Marines are still stationed in Los Angeles, but we saw scenes there of federal troops in an empty park, essentially known for and famous for hosting summer camps. And we saw at this park there, federal troops just walking around because Donald Trump wants a show of force on the streets of the United States. He wants a show of force. Deploying out federal agents, deploying out active duty Marines, deploying out troops to be used against the American people. Mayor Karen Bass absolutely said, no way.
I am going to say.
Mayor Bass, I need to get my phone and we're departing.
Okay. All right. Statement, Mayor Bass. Mayor Bass.
Any comment, Mayor Bass?
Thank you.
Mayor Bass, any comment?
Yes, my comment is they need to leave, and they need to leave right now. They need to leave because this is unacceptable.
Who did you speak with?
Just wait and see.
Mayor Bass,
They will be leaving soon.
Mayor, who did you speak with on the phone just now? Who did you speak with on the phone?
The head of customs.
Wow.
Once again, that was Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles effectively shutting this down. The federal agent is like, hey, I have to get my phone back. We're leaving. Complete chaos what's going on here. They are literally still in Los Angeles because one of the things that Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, said is, hey, we're going to be staying in LA. We're not going to leave. We're effectively going to seize this city. That's what's happening right now. They're trying to take over a city where the people elected their officials democratically and federal agents are still there. Another story that we're watching closely is Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, at the White House, of course, after bombing Iran. And then, of course, pretending like they were innocent here. He presented Donald Trump with a Nobel Peace Prize, saying, hey, Mr. President, I nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize because you deserve it, sir. I mean, this is where we are right now. In 2025, a war criminal has nominated the President of the United States, who bombed Iran in response to Israel's provocation, presenting him with the Nobel Peace Prize. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. But that's where we are in the current iteration of politics and chaos. That's going to do it for this TJPS Evening News Show tonight. I will see you again tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to subscribe to the Jeremiah Patterson Show on all platforms. You can follow us on Blue Sky and Substack at TJPS News. You can also email me, tjpsnews@gmail.com. Be sure to comment your questions, your suggestions, your concerns, any topics you want to hear on the show. I'm always here to opening and engaging with people in the comments. If you want to support the Jeremiah Patterson Show, please do so, as this is an independent news media platform, and we rely on your donations to continue this crucial work. You can support us at TJPS News through Cashapp, Venmo, PayPal. You can also become a paid subscriber to the Jeremiah Patterson Show on Substack at TJPS News for just $7.99 a month or $75 a year. Thank you all so much for watching tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Dr. Cortinas. I appreciate you all so very much. If you enjoyed the show tonight, you're definitely going to enjoy the show tomorrow. Don't miss it. The Jeremiah Patterson Show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I will see you again tomorrow night. Stay tuned.